The room felt smaller with every second. I could feel eyes on me from every direction, but no one said a word. A few people looked down at their plates, pretending not to hear. Others just watched, like it was some kind of show. My chest felt tight, but I kept my face still. I wasn't going to give him the reaction he wanted. I had learned that lesson a long time ago. My father stood at the head of the table, confident and loud, like always. He thrived on control, on being the center of attention. And tonight, I was his target. Not for the first time, just the worst time. I glanced around the room. My aunt avoided my eyes. My cousin gave me a small, uncomfortable smile. My brother leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, saying nothing. That hurt more than anything. No one was surprised. That's what made it worse. This wasn't new to them. But they didn't know everything. They didn't know the long nights I spent fixing problems that weren't mine. They didn't know the quiet sacrifices, the things I gave up without ever saying a word. And they definitely didn't know the truth my father had been hiding for years. I looked at him again. He was still talking, still tearing me down like it was nothing. Like I was nothing. For a moment, I thought about walking out. Just leaving and never coming back. It would have been easier. Quieter. But something inside me told me to stay. Just a little longer. Because I knew something he didn't. My phone buzzed softly in my pocket. I didn't need to check it. I already knew what it meant. Timing. I took a slow breath and straightened slightly, my hand steady now. The weight I had been carrying for years didn't feel as heavy anymore. Then, just as his voice started to rise again, there was a knock at the door. And everything was about to change. Growing up in that house meant learning your place early. Lennox was the one everyone talked about with pride. He had the perfect career, the perfect image, and he always knew what to say. Brielle wasn't far behind. She was sharp, confident, and always praised for her achievements. Every conversation somehow came back to them. I was just there. No one ever said it directly at first, but it was clear. I was the one who didn't measure up. If I did something right, it was ignored. If I made a mistake, it was remembered for years. Comparisons were constant, like a quiet rule in the family. Why can't you be more like Lennox, or look at Brielle, she figured it out. It never stopped. Over time, I stopped trying to prove anything. Not because I didn't care, but because nothing I did seemed to change how they saw me. It was easier to stay quiet, keep my head down, and handle things on my own. Family gatherings were never easy. They looked normal from the outside, laughter, food, small talk, but underneath, there was always tension. Conversations felt forced. Every word had weight. One wrong move, and the mood could shift instantly. I learned how to read the room, when to speak, and when to stay silent. Most of the time, silence was safer. But this gathering felt different from the moment I walked in. There was something in the air I couldn't ignore. My father seemed more intense than usual, like he had something to prove. Lennox kept checking his watch, distracted. Brielle looked uneasy, even though she tried to hide it. People weren't as relaxed as they pretended to be. It didn't feel like a normal family dinner. It felt like something was building up, like a storm that had been waiting for the right moment to hit. And somehow, I knew I was at the center of it. Dinner started off like any formal gathering. Plates were passed around, glasses filled, and polite conversations filled the room. My father moved easily from one person to another, shaking hands, smiling, acting like everything was perfect. To anyone watching, he looked proud and in control. I stayed quiet, focusing on my food, trying not to draw attention. Then he stood up to speak. At first, it sounded like a normal speech. He talked about progress, success, and how far things had come. People nodded, some even clapped lightly. But then his tone shifted. It was small at first, just a slight change in his voice. He started making comments that seemed harmless on the surface, but I knew exactly what they meant. Little jokes. Small remarks. Each one aimed at me. A few people laughed, unsure if they should. Others exchanged looks but stayed silent. I could feel the shift in the room, even if no one said it out loud. Then the jokes stopped being jokes. His words got sharper, more direct. He started pointing out my failures like they were facts. He questioned my choices, my work, even my worth. It wasn't hidden anymore. It was clear who he was talking about. I kept my eyes down, listening without reacting. The room grew quiet. Forks stopped moving. Conversations faded. No one interrupted him. No one told him to stop. I could feel the weight of every word, but I didn't respond. I had learned that reacting would only make things worse. He wanted a reaction. He wanted control of the moment. So I gave him nothing. Still, inside, something felt different. This wasn't just another round of criticism. He wasn't holding back at all. It felt planned, like he had been waiting for this moment. I slowly looked up, meeting his eyes for a second. There was something there I hadn't seen before. And that's when I realized, this wasn't going to stop on its own. His voice grew louder, more confident, like he knew no one would stop him. What started as comments turned into direct attacks. He spoke about my career like it was nothing, like all the work I had done meant zero. He said I had no direction, no real value, no future worth talking about. A few people shifted in their seats, clearly uncomfortable, but still, no one spoke. Then he went further. He accused me of living off the family name, like I had never done anything on my own. Like everything I had came from him. The words were sharp and clear, leaving no room for misunderstanding. I could feel the judgment in the room, even from people who didn't fully believe him. I kept my face calm, but inside, it hit hard. Not because I believed him, but because I knew how far from the truth it was. He didn't stop there. He started talking about the future, about what people deserve. His tone made it obvious who he was talking about. He made it clear that not everyone earns a place, not everyone deserves to be included. The message didn't need to be said directly. Everyone understood it. I felt a tight pressure in my chest, but I stayed still. This was the moment he had been building toward. I glanced around again. No one looked at me now. It was easier for them that way. If they didn't see me, they didn't have to choose a side. For a second, I thought about speaking up. About finally saying everything I had kept in for years. But I stopped myself. Not yet. I had held on to the truth for this long. I wasn't going to waste it in a moment of anger. I took a slow breath and let his words pass. Because while he thought he was in control, while he believed this moment belonged to him, there was something he didn't see coming. And I was waiting for it. The room stayed quiet for a second after he finished speaking. It was the kind of silence that felt heavy, like no one knew what to say next. He looked around, almost satisfied, like he had just proven something. Then came a knock at the door. It was firm and clear, cutting through the tension. Everyone turned toward the sound. No one was expecting anyone else. One of the relatives nearby got up and opened the door. A man stepped inside, calm and composed. He was dressed in a dark suit, neat and professional, like he had just come from an important meeting. His presence didn't match the mood of the room, and that made it even more noticeable. He didn't hesitate. He walked in with purpose, his eyes scanning the room until they landed exactly where they needed to. On my father. For the first time that night, I saw something change in his expression. It wasn't anger or confidence anymore. It was confusion. He hadn't expected this. The man stopped a few steps inside, standing straight, completely at ease despite everyone staring at him. No one spoke. Even the smallest sounds had stopped. My father finally broke the silence. His voice wasn't as strong as before. He asked what this was about. The man didn't answer right away. He took a brief look around the room, almost like he was making sure everyone was present. Then he focused back on my father. There was no hesitation when he spoke. He said he needed to discuss something important. Something that couldn't wait. The tone was calm, but serious enough to shift the entire atmosphere. Whatever this was, it wasn't casual. My father frowned slightly, clearly annoyed but also unsure. He tried to brush it off, saying it wasn't the right time. But the man didn't move. He stood there, steady, like he wasn't leaving until he said what he came to say. And just like that, the control my father had over the room started to slip. Gideon didn't waste a moment. He pulled a folder from under his arm and held it steady. The way he walked and stood made it clear he was in charge now. He spoke calmly, but every word carried weight. "I'm here regarding a matter that cannot wait," he said. His eyes scanned the room, then rested on my father. "It concerns documents that are very important." My father's confident posture faltered slightly. He frowned, trying to hide it, but it didn't go unnoticed. The relatives leaned in, curiosity mixed with unease. Whispers ran through the room, soft but urgent. Everyone could sense that something big was about to happen. Gideon opened the folder carefully, almost ceremoniously. He began to lay out papers one by one, handing copies to my father, my siblings, and others who needed to see. Each sheet contradicted the claims my father had just made. Numbers, agreements, legal signatures, proof that everything he had said about me was wrong. I stayed still, letting it happen. I didn't need to speak yet. I had been carrying this truth for years, and now it was finally being revealed in front of everyone. Some family members gasped quietly, others exchanged shocked looks. You could see their surprise building as they read, realizing that the story they had believed for years might have been a lie. My father tried to respond, but his words stumbled. There was no quick comeback. The confidence he had displayed moments ago was gone, replaced by tension and confusion. Gideon continued calmly, explaining each point clearly. Every statement, every document, chipped away at my father's version of events. It was methodical, precise, and undeniable. Through it all, I kept my eyes on him, watching. I felt a strange mix of relief and anticipation. Finally, the secret I had protected, the sacrifices no one knew about, the quiet strength I had built, were coming to light in a way my father couldn't control. The room shifted. The weight of years of lies was lifting, and I remained silent, letting the truth speak for itself. As Gideon went through the documents, a deeper truth started to emerge, one that no one in the room had realized before. It became clear that the financial stability everyone thought belonged to my father was actually built quietly by me. Years ago, when his business was close to failing, I had stepped in without anyone knowing. I had worked late nights, made difficult decisions, and sacrificed my own comfort to keep things afloat. Every move I made was careful and calculated, done behind the scenes so no one would suspect that I was the one preventing disaster. The papers showed contracts, bank statements, and approvals that all had my name on them. Every major decision that saved the business had been my doing. Yet, my father had always presented the success as if it were all his work. Everyone in the family had believed him, never questioning it. It was strange to watch the expressions around the room change. Some faces turned pale. Others looked down, clearly realizing how much they had misunderstood me. The siblings who were always praised began to see the truth, at least a little. I stayed calm. I didn't need to boast or explain. The proof spoke louder than any words I could have said. Gideon highlighted one particularly important detail: every loan, every recovery plan, every strategic deal that kept the family afloat, my name was attached. Without my effort, the family's wealth could have crumbled years ago. My father's posture sank. For the first time, he wasn't the man in control. His pride, his authority, the image he had built for decades, it was slipping from his grasp. I realized then that the power I held was more than just financial. It was about truth, about finally showing that years of being underestimated did not make me weak. The work I had done quietly, the sacrifices I had made, and the patience I had maintained, all of it was undeniable now. The hidden reality was out. And for the first time, everyone had to see me not as the disappointment, but as the one who had quietly held everything together while he took all the credit. Gideon paused for a moment, letting everyone absorb what had just been revealed. Then he spoke again, this time with a sharper edge. He held up another set of documents and looked directly at my father. "These papers show something more," he said calmly. Despite knowing the truth about who was keeping the family business alive, there were plans to cut Corbin out completely. He was going to be excluded from everything he rightfully owns. A murmur ran through the room. People leaned in, eyes widening. My father's confident expression faltered. He opened his mouth to respond, but no words came. The documents clearly contradicted any explanation he might give. Gideon laid out the details, contracts, ownership agreements, and legal drafts that had been prepared to strip me of control over key assets. It was obvious he had been planning this for years, even though he knew full well that I was the one who had saved the business. The room shifted. Whispers became louder. Faces turned toward my father, some in shock, some in anger. It wasn't just a revelation about my role, it was a revelation about his betrayal. He had been willing to erase me entirely while taking credit for everything. I stayed calm, letting the truth do the work. There was no need to argue or shout. The proof was clear, and everyone could see it. My siblings looked stunned. Lennox and Brielle exchanged glances, realization dawning that their father had been hiding more than they had known. Even distant relatives who had never questioned him were now staring with disbelief. My father shifted uncomfortably in his chair, finally realizing that his lies and manipulations had been exposed. For once, he was the one on the defensive. I felt a strange sense of relief. The betrayal that had weighed on me for years was now in the open. The people who had blindly trusted him were beginning to see the truth. And just like that, the balance of power in the room had changed. The tables had turned. The room no longer supported him, his own actions had isolated him, and everyone could see the full extent of his deceit. I finally spoke, but not with anger. My voice was calm, steady, and deliberate. I didn't need to yell or argue. The truth had already been shown, and my words now carried the weight of everything I had endured. "I never wanted credit," I said quietly, letting it echo in the room. "I only wanted respect. That's all I ever asked for." My father's face turned red, frustration and disbelief mixing together. He opened his mouth to speak, but I held up my hand. This time, I wasn't going to let him twist the situation. I didn't need his approval, his praise, or anyone else's recognition. I looked around at my family. Some faces were shocked, others uncertain. A few avoided my eyes, unable to face what had just been revealed. But I didn't care about their reactions. My focus was clear. "I've done what I could to protect this family, to keep everything together," I continued. "But I am done. I will not continue to cover up lies or take responsibility for actions that aren't mine. That burden ends tonight." The words felt powerful as I said them. I could see the tension in the room shift. The control my father had clung to for decades was slipping further with every passing second. I didn't need to stay and watch him crumble. That wasn't the point. My revenge wasn't about humiliation or proving him wrong in front of everyone. My revenge was in walking away, in refusing to let him manipulate me any longer, in choosing myself over his deceit. I turned and left the room, each step lighter than the last. Behind me, the room felt heavy with silence. My father remained seated, unable to regain control, forced to face the consequences of his own actions. For the first time in years, I felt free. Free from the expectations, free from the lies, free from the weight of being underestimated. The victory wasn't loud or dramatic, it was quiet, internal, and complete. I didn't need anyone to cheer. The strength I had built for myself was enough. The real revenge had been claimed, simply by choosing myself. I walked out of that room knowing things would never be the same. Behind me, I could hear murmurs and whispers, the kind that carried both shock and judgment. The family's carefully maintained image had shattered in an instant, and my father sat frozen, stripped of the control he had always wielded. No one spoke up for him. The relatives who had once nodded at his every word now looked at him differently, some with disbelief, some with quiet anger. The confidence he had relied on for so long was gone, replaced by tension and awkward silence. It was strange to watch. Not because I wanted to see him humiliated, but because I finally understood the power of truth. Years of lies, manipulation, and control could not withstand honesty and quiet strength. The tables had turned without me raising my voice, without me needing to fight. I didn't linger. I didn't feel the need to witness the full extent of his discomfort. The victory wasn't in watching him suffer, it was in my own freedom. I had stepped out of the shadows of expectations, out of the constant comparisons and silent criticisms, and finally claimed control over my life. The family dynamic had collapsed. Alliances that had seemed unshakable were uncertain. My siblings and relatives were left to grapple with the reality of what had really happened, and the truth about my role in keeping everything together. It was uncomfortable, but it was necessary. As I walked away, I felt lighter than I had in years. I realized the real revenge wasn't in proving anyone wrong or forcing them to recognize me. It wasn't in shouting or retaliating. The real revenge was in choosing myself, prioritizing my own dignity, and refusing to let their lies define my life. Every step away from that house reinforced it. I had taken back my power quietly, without drama, and I would never look back. I was free from judgment, free from manipulation, and free to live on my own terms. And in that freedom I found something stronger than revenge, peace, clarity, and the strength to never let anyone else control my story again.